I'm Clinton.
And welcome to Black Atlantic. We are a primarily Black Atlantic-centric podcast, website, and media channel with the goal of bringing POC Atlantic voices to the world.
And you can expect to hear from us every week with guests, segments, panels, roundtables, or anything else, just exploring topics from all over Atlantic Canada and the world sometimes.
Be sure to check out blackatlantic.ca for all of our content.
And follow us on IG, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and more.
How's it going?
I'm good. It's been a weird week for me. I'm in the throw of trying to get finished a whole bunch of corporate taxes, which is a lot of hard work, especially because I wasn't responsible enough to be doing this stuff weekly throughout the whole year. So that's been dumping on me. But almost done that. Otherwise, been a good week. I had some friends down for a few days visiting us, which was really nice. So they his kids too. So we had a fun few days there. Got a new vehicle, a new to me vehicle, a pretty sweet Buick Enclave 7-seater, pro white finish. It's pretty fancy, fully loaded, but it is a used car, so we're happy about that. And I don't know, just been on my grind. What's up with you?
Well, since we last had an episode, I am back in Toronto, and I probably would still test positive for COVID because that's the nature of the illness, but I feel much better. It's been 13 days since a symptom, so I have been let out of the house and I've done a few things, but mainly just, filled up my house with groceries again and like did regular stuff. Went out and saw a couple of friends, but nothing too crazy, just hanging out, the usual. Been busy. Very
Good.
good.
I'm happy you're good.
Yeah, how do we want to even talk about this topic?
Today for episode 7 of Black Atlantic, we're titling this The War Report. I think everyone knows what war we're talking about. It's been in the news. It's everywhere you look. It's on everyone's minds. It's affecting everyone's lives. It is the Russia-Ukraine war taking place, and we're going to get into it. What have your thoughts been on everything in general so far, Hillary?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by giving the context that one of my jobs happens to be with the Humanitarian Coalition. And so when there is a major crisis in the world, whether that's the earthquake in Haiti that took place in August, or, the major hit of COVID that hit India so bad that they were not equipped with it, we sort of tend to be activated. It comprises of 12 organizations, some really well-known ones like Save the Children, World Vision, 10 others. And when the government of Canada decides that action should take place, we tend to get activated. We start to accept donations and funding, but then that also means that as a communications person, I sort of get emotionally bombarded with pictures from the front lines of whatever humanitarian issue is going on. So my initial thoughts were obviously stressed. It feels, and it's definitely because we're in the West, there's been a long time since I've been hearing of a war that could, be World War III or impact us really heavily. And I know full well that there are wars still going on in other places. But it felt to me sort of as scary as I remember like the war in Iraq feeling when I was really little. And so that I've seen pictures of, cats being left behind and cancer patients who can't continue treatment and people fleeing, and all of these photos have been extremely sad and disheartening, and it's all extremely concerning. It's like, not to brush it off, but it's a major bummer. It's very sad. I definitely didn't know as much about it until we started talking about it before the episode, but to me at the time, before we started recording, it felt like very unnecessary. I was very confused as to why this was taking place, but I'm more of a lover than a fighter, and I would really appreciate it if we weren't if there weren't wars. So for me, I think it's really sad. What about you?
It's absolutely sad. And I commented on this at the start of the war, that there's probably about 40 different global conflicts taking place right now. I believe there's a lot of them in Africa, and they're mainly ignored. And some of these wars are taking up to 10,000 lives per year. Other ones are taking between 1,000 to 10,000, and then the rest of them would be under 1,000. But there's 40 different actual conflicts going on in the war. Some of them are civil wars. some of them are feuds between countries. A lot of people would be surprised to learn that even countries like China are not openly, but in a way, they're fighting with other countries around them. Like there's conflicts going on that don't get reported. This one is sweeping the globe, of course, because it's Russia, the big bad enemy over there in the east, and also because Russia has nuclear weapons. So that takes things to a whole other level. That does make things a lot scarier. What we've been seeing in the media a lot is another reason it's been implied that this is taking the world by storm in such a big way is because it's a war between countries of people with relatively white skin. We've heard lots of comments in the media that pertain to that exactly in the way that we'll let our viewers decide of whether that these news reporters are being racist or not. But yeah, when a country that has the nuclear arsenal capable of destroying the entire planet goes to war, I guess it does raise the stakes a lot. I'm sure everyone has had those thoughts. What's going to happen? Is this World War III? Yada, yada, yada. Spoiler alert, I don't think it's going to be World War III in any way whatsoever. I don't know the mental health of Vladimir Putin, but I know he's a pretty intelligent person. That doesn't mean a good person, but a pretty intelligent person. And when you nuke the world, when you nuke any piece of land, you can't use that land anymore. And, land is important. So for other reasons as well, I don't see that happening, but war is horrible. Yeah, it's surprising that in this day and age, we're still like shooting each other, blowing each other up, killing each other over conflict. After World War II, with the sober realization that we now have the technology to wipe humanity off the earth, things started happening a lot differently. Countries started relying on each other a lot more for trade and economics, and those trade relations have prevented a lot of wars. The new way to attain power in the world is economically and not necessarily by, it's actually cheaper to attain power economically. It's more prosperous for any country involved than going in there and spending millions of dollars and human lives just killing. Um, it's really sad. There's 1.4 million Ukrainians living in Canada. So I think that's another reason that over here in Canada, a lot of people are talking about it a lot. But yeah, on top of everything I just said, to reflect your sentiment, it's really sad. It's really sad to think that we're just we've come so far, and yet there's still in multiple places in the world, including Russia, Ukraine, this desire to just kill each other over disagreements, land, power, economics. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know what else to say, because I think I just find it really appalling and sad. And I very much, it's a different level of exhausting, but it feels as exhausting as like all racism, hatred, everything. I just get this very big weight of just like, why? I don't understand why we can't all get along. I don't understand the point of it all, especially because I feel like life is so valuable and important, and it's finite, and I think it's a very valuable resource to be alive, and to just put people's lives in jeopardy or make their lives more difficult for, I don't know, land, the almighty dollar. I don't know. To me, it feels very pointless. It's the same reason that, like, the same sort of questioning I had for like with a while back when New Brunswick was having the strikes with the CUP, and I was like, Blaine, just give people the money. I really have a hard time with leaders who it feels like don't actually want the greater good for the world and society, and maybe they do for their own country and not the rest. That's where I have a hard time understanding it all.
And the last thing you said is key, right? Like, maybe for their country. I think it's very obvious that after World War II, America rose from the ashes as the most powerful and most dominant country in the world. And that has been the global political structure for the past 70 years. It's run by the West. It's run in the West by what they call a democracy. And it is compared to many other countries, but there's been this global power structure that maybe not all countries agree with. Maybe over there in Russia, they have different philosophies on the best way to live,
Mhm.
and they want to push their narratives and stuff like that. So basically, for people who are still tuned in, what we're going to talk about for the next little while is the Ukraine-Russia war, the West's involvement, and then we're going to get into some things that are not being covered in the news enough. I don't think there's Britney Griner, who is the WNBA star, who was arrested conveniently after all this started, an American citizen. There's all the video footage we've been seeing about people at the border not letting African, Lebanese, and East Indian students on the train. There has been some reporters from CBS who have said some pretty shocking and racist things, as well as Prince William is now sort of being dragged through the mud a little bit for some comments he made about the war and comparisons to Europe and other places in the world.
Mhm.
Do you mind if I talk about what we just talked about before the recording?
Yes, please educate people on the West's involvement in all of this. And because you just educated me. And so I'm happy to let you take the
Well,
reins on this.
we watched a video that educated you. I'm far from an
Yes.
expert on the topic. I'd never pretend to be. But Russia, there is this concept of, and Russia is probably not the most wholesome country. Putin is not a good man, I don't believe. But I don't know that the leaders over here in the West are good people either, is what I'm cautiously tiptoeing around. In 1949, there was the NATO Act was formed, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, I believe, and they were an anti-Russia organization meant to protect democracy, push democratic values, and sort of push back the communism that Russia was putting out at the time. And they kept on expanding east. At the same time, Russia created the Warsaw Pact with other Eastern European companies, which countries, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. A country is kind of a company in a lot of ways, but with Germany and Poland and stuff like that, and they were kind of pushing west. So these were these two allyships against each other. In the 90s, Putin, or the president of Russia at the time, agreed to dissolve the Warsaw Pact, I believe, with the falling of the Berlin Wall. And there are a lot of American documents that say that America and the other leading forces in NATO agreed to do the same. They agreed to dissolve NATO because, it had been so many years since the World War II. I believe the Cold War had been coming to an end. And so the need for these aggressive organizations was declining. Well, NATO didn't deband their organization. In fact, after the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact in the 90s, they kept on pushing east. They kept on adding more and more Eastern countries in Europe to NATO, threatening Russia and Russia's security. As early as 2007, Putin spoke to the world and he said, "What is with this aggression? Why do you keep pushing east? Why do you still exist? Who is this organization designed to fight against? Why do you keep coming into Russia's backyard?" He kind of warned them to stop doing this. This is not cool. We do not feel safe here in Russia. But it was completely ignored through all the American presidents, especially Bush, Clinton, Obama, Trump. They all ignored Russia's demands to stop this eastward expansion. Many pertinent and notable people in the West also spoke out and said, like, this is really going too far. You're going to aggravate the beast, and Russia's going to respond to this. And finally, decades, multiple decades after all this, now we have the war in Russia, Ukraine. Sure, maybe Putin has these ideas of restoring the USSR and all its glory, world domination and stuff like that. Really, I think it's just a call to the world to F off. I think war is not the most profitable way to improve the economic status of your country these days. It's through trade and economics, which is why sanctions are the way that the whole world is responding right now, because that is, in a lot of ways, the safest, smartest, and best way to hurt another country in 2022. It's not by blowing them up, it's by creating these sanctions. And anyways, I don't want to babble on too long, but the war is just not so one-sided. It's not just that all we hear in the media is reports of this crazy Eastern aggression, Russia controlling the media, lying to their people. And as I watch that, I'm like, well, that's kind of what happens over here in North America. Even in New Brunswick, the media is all owned by one company. And even in America and in Canada, many, not all the organizations, are you going to say CHMA?
Well, I was going to say CHMA.FM, thank you for being independent radio station, but also Post Media did buy out all of the Irving owned newspapers about 3 weeks ago. So
Yes,
it's
I heard
no
about that.
longer Irving owned, but Post Media is still very conservative. And so it's like an adjacent switch while still no longer owned by that same organization.
Yeah, same thing though, even outside of New Brunswick, like Rupert Murdoch, like he owns
Sure.
Fox and hundreds of other news agencies. And a lot of these news agencies, no matter what city or town you're in, they're all owned by the same people. We talk about the Russian oligarchs and their power and their capitalist money. It's the same thing over here. You can find on YouTube videos of like hundreds of different newscasts reporting on the same topic using the exact same sentences. I've seen these on YouTube. They're synced up. Like no matter what city it is, no matter what news broadcast it is, they're reading the same script. And I know they get a lot of information from Reuters and stuff like that, but it's really a controlled narrative. Just like Facebook can control the narrative by clicking a few buttons and deciding what people see on their news feeds. It's the same thing in the media. The Russian-Ukraine war is horrible, but just for listeners who want to look into it a bit more, the West bears responsibility for all the death taking place right now. And just to go back to it, it's all really sad, and it's beyond us as regular citizens. There's not a lot we can do to impact it, but other than help refugees. I don't know if you want to talk about that a lot more, Hillary. I know there's a lot. Do you have info going on? And I think I've heard a lot of comments on the lack of the way people are embracing bringing Ukrainians here, and I'm all for immigration no matter where they come from, refugees as well. But there's a lot of parallels between the anger Canadians expressed when we're bringing Syrians here, people from Yemen here. When the Canadian government announces that they're bringing people here from Middle Eastern or African or other war-torn countries that aren't Europeans with light skin, there's huge public outcry. Except in this case, there's nothing but welcome open arms and no talk about refugees or migration or taking jobs or affecting the economy or stuff like that.
I have a lot of thoughts and I have a lot of comments. So
Awesome.
I'll go in order.
No, awesome. Good. Yeah, I'm talking a lot. All you. Take
No,
it over.
okay.
You take it away.
First thoughts are that by and large, and it's something that you and I understand as minorities, whoever has the power, has the money, controls the narrative. And I think that all of the anti-Russian sentiment sometimes is very similar to anti-American sentiment when Canada wants to position themselves as non-racist and kind and better, and then America does it to not be like Russia. We all have this big brother that's really similar to us, but we're not like them. We treat our people better than them. But what you're saying is completely true. All organizations have a reason for existing that unfortunately is not serving the masses. It is to make money, it is to make capital, it is to serve the head honchos who work there, whether that is the countries that we all live in, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, whatever, the platforms that we use. They could wipe us all off of the planet. They could wipe us all off of their platforms. TikTok could just be gone tomorrow. All of our Facebook pictures could be gone tomorrow. Russia could make whatever choices they want tomorrow because we are not in charge of really anything. We exist in a space and we pay to exist in these spaces, and that sucks. And yeah, I guess I'll pivot now to, in terms of like humanitarian aid, shameless plug, humanitariancoalition.ca. We are raising money there. And so are all of the 12 member agencies. So if you would go to Humanitarian Coalition's Twitter, you could pick a specific organization. You can just donate to the Humanitarian Coalition. So yes, that would be great. Also, because Canada gave Red Cross a matching fund, which is fantastic for Red Cross, but our organization would also like to do a lot. And raise a lot of funds as well. I believe we've surpassed $1 million as of Friday, which is wonderful. And all of our proceeds are going directly to member agencies that are already there on foot. They are bringing toys to kids who are most likely traumatized and sitting in like a refugee aid center, food, sanitary items, hygiene items, cots, beds for people fleeing. A lot of work specifically at the Hungarian border, but eventually it's all very fluid. That's the word that we keep using. We don't know what the impact will be at the very end. We hope that there will be a way to help rebuild some of the country if Russia is not successful in taking it. But we don't fully know where all of the funds will go in the end. But right now it is helping people get across borders and trying to just keep people safe and not traumatized and as happy and healthy as they can be. In terms of the other things that you said, so as I told you before, when we watched this little video explaining the West's implication, I had questions and I still have the same questions, which is that like, it feels to me like when there's like a bully, there's a bully and you're afraid of the bully. So you sort of get a bunch of friends to help protect you in case the bully does something. But I don't know that I don't understand what the West was ever going to do against Russia so that Russia would feel unsafe. And I like listening to all of this stuff, I felt like I can understand that continuing to have NATO when the Warsaw, what was the word? Agreement?
Warsaw Pact.
Warsaw Pact, thank you. After it had dissolved, I understand Putin being like, and whoever was in charge when the Warsaw Pact did dissolve, being like, can y'all do the same thing? And then the Americas were like, no, we will not do the same thing. And I understand that keeping NATO alive is very much like poking the bear. But at the same time, and maybe that's me being a crazy, naive, Canadian raised person, but I never envisioned America one day being like, okay, everybody in NATO, we're going to gang up, we're all going to go to war and we're going to invade Russia. So what is Russia afraid of NATO doing? And in that same vein, I don't understand NATO's benefit to existing other than to protect themselves from Russia in case something like this happened, and it happened. So it feels very much like a, I don't know, rope pulling game here. It feels like one thing is serving the other. You're afraid of Russia, so you build this thing, but building this thing and continuing it is also aggravating Russia. But to dissolve it also feels very stupid because Russia is still sort of scary and a bully and Russia, but that's also how they're being portrayed to us. And maybe that's not accurate. We must question everything. So that's where I'm a little like, I don't know who's benefiting from what. It feels all very rigged and like a game that they're playing against each other.
You're totally right. As much of a worldwide web that we have and global connections that we have nowadays, the media we consume is actually very isolated. You can look anywhere you want on the internet. Our internet is not censored like it might be in China or North Korea or even in Russia, but you typically only consume mostly media from the West here. And, around the world, America is not perceived as the savior. They are portrayed as over here in Canada and America. And like you said, obviously even Canada snubs their nose at America.
Yes.
But it's the same thing over there in Russia. Like the West is portrayed as the bad guy, as the bullies, as the evil people. And even though we do a weekly podcast where we give our opinions that hopefully are unique in a lot of ways, our opinions are actually formed a lot by the media we consume. We can't be completely unbiased because we are biased from what we consume. Yes. Everyone circles, you're hanging out with friends, you think you know what you're talking about, but you're really just repeating words other people said, and we really, none of us really know anything. The reason I'm saying all this is, yeah, Russia looks like the bully to us, but to them, NATO looks like the bully to Russian citizens, to people who may be doing Russian podcasts in their homes right now on a Saturday night. So why does NATO need to exist? I don't know. Like, what is NATO's function? NATO's function is to protect themselves against the crazy Russians. I mean, we all know Russia has enough nukes to destroy the world. They haven't done
Yeah.
it yet. So basically what I'm saying is I actually lost my train of thought, but I think it was just speaking to this whole concept that who is the good guy and who is the bad
Yeah.
guy, and why do these organizations exist? And I think you're gonna have to take it from here because I did lose my train of thought.
I'll hope that it comes back, but I guess my question is like, I can understand the various ways in which you could make us, America, look like the bad guys. Like, I know that my best friend Soraya is much more versed in this, but I believe every single American president, at least recently, has committed some kind of like technically a war crime. And so it's not hard to pinpoint things that, Obama's done, Trump's done, Clinton's done, and been like, this is an example of what they could do to us, Russia, and we hate them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't, because America's been so busy attacking other places and being jerks to other people, I just don't see the specific American against Russian propaganda in recent years. And again, it's probably my own bias, but I understand the existence of NATO in terms of like what you just said. This place has enough nukes to kill all of us. We're going to form a little pact so that if something does happen, we can protect ourselves because they have this much power / ammunition, whatever. Whereas like Russia being mad about that, I'm like, I wish that they could, have a therapy session and self-reflect at their power and be like, yeah, I get it. Like I still see them very much as like aggressors. Not that America or us are like not. It's confusing to me.
No, that's okay. And I did remember what I was trying, my
Yes.
point of everything I was getting to is that, yeah, America has caused a lot of shit in the world, even since 9/11, which,
Oh, yeah.
Again, can't fully be blamed only on, some people in Afghanistan with box cutters who want to. No, there's a whole story behind that.
Yes.
But since then, America invaded Iraq. They went to war with them, dropping bombs. Everyone's applauding, yay, dropping bombs, destroying Iraqi human beings and civilians and not hitting your targets and killing children and hitting schools and churches and stuff like that. And it turned because of the threat of, I think, chemical warfare, and it turns out that there was no threat whatsoever. Then the narrative that Bush was spitting at the time was that we have to take out Iraq because yada yada yada. It was all false. There's been the Afghanistan war, there's the Korea conflict, and then but you were talking about American-Russian tensions. Well, what happened in Syria how many years ago? That the entire country of Syria was destroyed because of American and Russian interests. I am not a political scientist, but I think that one side was being backed by Russia, I believe the rebels, and then the other side was being backed by America. And they were actually having an indirect war in Syria. They destroyed the country, wrecked the people's lives. Like, and these are, I lived in Egypt for a month, and I've always known that we're all people, we're all equal, but never more than just like living with the people in Egypt in what is a third world country for a month did I realize that no matter where you are, no matter how you're dressed, whether you're wearing jeans and a t-shirt and a cowboy hat or a galabea because it's 40-degree weather out there and it's just a good way to keep cool, people are just people. People just want to have kids, buy groceries, make an income, go to university, watch TV, go on social media, go on dates. I know that works different in different countries, but people just want to be people. And yeah, America and Russia destroyed a country of human beings in Syria over their conflicts. So the West has been like, you can kind of see why Russia might consider the West a threat. America has been involved in so many conflicts around the world and so many wars, mostly over oil, power, and money, that anyways, before we move on, it's America could be seen as a threat to other countries. Now, I don't think I agree with Russia's political viewpoints, but I'm just saying when it comes to threats and human beings, the West could be perceived as pretty dangerous too.
I want to add my favorite quote that I learned in therapy because of you saying that people are just people, is that all humans deserve euphoria, and that transcends all things. All people are people who just deserve their own euphoria, and that can be whatever and exist however. And I just really think that that's valid, that all people are people who exist, and you don't have to be discriminatory about the way that they exist or use them as bartering chips in warfare. And I can definitely understand how America could be perceived as a threat. I think that it's weird to me to feel that way because it does feel like Russia has more power than America. And so for that, like I feel that way in some ways. Like, I'm
No
more
way.
afraid. I'm more afraid, I think. Yeah.
No way. Russia's broke. Russia has no money, and I think they've shown that even their military is not up to par.
Well,
I
to be fair,
mean,
yeah, they're not doing great right now.
yeah, they've been bashing Ukraine for weeks, a country that was perceived to is being able to be taken over in days, and maybe even they thought that would be the case. um, I know, and Ukraine is getting a ton of weaponry and training from NATO countries, missiles, ammunition, and stuff like that. But still, um, Putin says this is all going according to plan, but no, they're getting their ass handed to them, so much so that even now China is stepping in,
Yeah.
calling for restraint. I think China has created some sanctions on their own. And I thought my main concern was that Russia and China were going to team up, become this crazy superpower, and just take over the world, because China is on the path to becoming the number one superpower in the world, if they're not already. But I think the leader in China is a little unimpressed with Putin right now, because even he's starting to step up and speak out about him.
Yeah.
I think he's like, yo, bro, like, we linked up, we shook hands, we've got this no limits pact between us. I thought when you went to war, you'd be able to perform a bit better. I thought you were going to pull out the big guns, my man. And like,
Which, like,
it's kind of disgraceful. Like, I'm going to distance myself from you a bit right now, because you're not the man I thought you were.
and keep in mind too that China, like, while committing like atrocities and holding the Olympics
Genocide
at
of
the same
millions
time.
of Muslims. Yeah, let's not talk about the millions of Muslims.
No, that's a whole other issue.
Hear
But
that
like,
China is genociding.
Imagine being like, I was able to hold the Olympics while committing genocide, and y'all can't take Ukraine. I'm outie.
Like, what have you done for me lately?
Not that this is funny, it's not, but
no.
that just, yeah, poor performance on Russia's part.
No, like laughing to horrible situations is not always because you think something's funny. It's a natural human response to. Yeah. It can be a natural human response to tragedy as well.
Yes.
Whew, okay, those are our views, I think, on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But
let's get to the racism.
Yeah, there's some racisms going on in the media.
My favorite
we got to talk about these.
My favorite quote so far has been like, even during times of war, there is time for racism. Like, yep, unfortunately.
I'm going to do something we haven't done in our Zoom calls before.
Yeah.
I'm going to share my screen while we chat, and let's get into some of these conflicts. Sure. And I feel like I have been talking a lot this episode. So what do you want to touch on first?
I'll bring up some visuals here. That we should probably start talking about Britney Griner from the WNBA, who was detained by Russia at the start of these conflicts. And then no one really said anything about it. They just let her get detained.
It's not being discussed, barely at all. There's a couple articles here and there. Do you want to tell the listeners who may not know who Britney Griner is and why she's being detained?
I don't know a million things except for the fact that, like, WNBA star, American, who's been playing, I believe, for Russia in Russia for years. And I believe that the idea is that she's been detained as a power move to take thank you. Detained in Russia on February 17th on drug charges. However, yeah, I mean, I don't know much else.
Basically, she is a WNBA player who a lot of and this speaks to another topic about the gender wage gap. A lot of WNBA players choose to play overseas internationally during their off season just to supplement their income. I'm sure a WNBA player makes a lot more than your average person, but still, kind of peanuts compared to NBA players. So she plays for Russia in the off season, and that's why she was over there, to supplement her income. Now she was detained, and I cannot see this as being like, so she's being detained because authorities are claiming they found hashish oil cartridges in her luggage. So weed, like THC.
Yeah.
Maybe, but really hard to believe
Okay.
that, I mean, she's probably a intelligent person. And the idea that, during a global conflict between Russia and Ukraine, you're an American, and you're trying to leave the country, and you decide, and you're a WNBA player, meaning you do make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year,
Mm-hmm.
but you're traveling during this conflict with hashish oil cartridges
I'm gonna doubt it.
in your suitcase.
No.
Maybe, but I think that's some bullshit. I think that's a lie that the Russians are doing because they can use this American citizen as leverage.
Mm-hmm.
I know this happened in China, I think in 2017, with some UCLA players. They
Yeah.
were accused of stealing from a corner store, shoplifting. And again, and they came out and they apologized publicly, and they were so ashamed. But I mean, like, did they really do that? I find that a little hard to believe. I also find that it's hard to believe that they would detain her. I don't know if this says more about Russia or the States, if this was a plant to detain a Black woman.
Well,
Because
I'd
America
like,
hasn't really responded. So that's the background. And what are your
yeah.
thoughts on that?
Well, I was gonna make the joke that Russia shouldn't have picked a person of color because apparently America doesn't care because no one said anything. However,
Yeah.
what I've heard has been that no one is saying anything because apparently people don't want to like ruffle feathers, and there could be talks behind closed doors about ways to try to free her. But is that just also America covering up the fact that they're racist and they actually don't care? Like, I would believe either or. I have a hard time believing, I don't know, that they care that deeply about a Black woman detained in Russia. Sorry, America, you haven't proven to me that you would care. And I feel like Russia should have picked a white blonde player, and this would be everywhere. Just like it, it reminds me of that story of that influencer who was murdered by her boyfriend, who was white and blonde, and how the public went crazy about that. But then this Black woman who has also been murdered by a Bumble date, no one is talking about that in the same way. And it's sort of the same thing, that there's no damsel in distress vibes for Black women suffering in the world. And so yeah.
Wild. Yeah, authorities are saying they're trying to work behind closed doors and be very democratic, and it's a tense
Mm-hmm.
situation and stuff like that. And we have seen in articles that though they did advise Americans to leave, so maybe implying that it's her fault, which is kind of outrageous as well. But I don't remember the names. But if you recall, in Canada in the past couple of years, there was like a James and a James, who had been detained in China for
Yeah.
apparently illegal drug trafficking, and it was top of the news for a long time. It
Yeah.
was they were doing everything to try to get them out. Not sanctions, but there was all this conflict between Canada and China because Canada had detained Huawei executive for the States. But anyways, maybe slightly different dynamics, but there was a lot more attention paid to, I'm sorry, these white males who are detained in China than what has been afforded this Black American right now during this conflict. She could be jailed for 10 years. We don't know if these are false allegations. I'm sure they're still looking into them. Even if the hashish oil, I mean, come on. I wasn't there. I doubt this woman. If you were watching on YouTube, you've seen some photos of her, not to be superficial, but she looks like an intelligent person. I doubt she'd be trying to smuggle THC out of Russia in the middle of a conflict. Like, you could go buy that stuff in America. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, like regardless of looks, any person who has this kind of high profile job traveling in a place where they have been told is volatile against Americans based on conflict would know better. It would
Yeah.
take a very, very unaware person to make that kind of mistake. I do also find it interesting that they were telling Americans to, you mean America was saying, hey, Americans leave, not Russians telling Americans to leave?
No, Americans were saying if you're in Russia,
Because I was going to say, if
you should
Russians were
leave.
telling Americans to leave, then that's just them trying to find reasons to
Hmm.
detain the Americans. But
No, that
of
always
course,
happens when there's political like tensions and conflict. They
well,
take out,
yeah.
say it's, you should, like Trudeau was saying that a while back too regarding something last year, like you should probably leave this country.
Wait, and they said it this time too, like if you like that all, I think early on it was all family and children that had no reason to be with their like embassy leaders or whatever, like get the heck out of Dodge before things get dicey.
Yeah.
And here we are, things are dicey.
Yeah, it feels like racism for sure.
Yeah.
But we don't know. We weren't there. We don't know if she actually put hashish oil in her bag and is, I think the Russia is probably going to try to use it for some leverage, but it's a pretty sad situation.
Yeah.
Everyone's heard of African,
Yeah.
Lebanese, and East Indian students being detained at the borders, being prevented from leaving. Have you heard about this?
Of course.
What are your thoughts on this?
Again, even in times of war, there is space for racism. I've seen the videos. We shared one on our Instagram. And we've, talked about it at my place of employment as well. It's really sad. Again, this idea of like, you're not really of this country and therefore deserve to suffer more than us. And that can be said about a lot of different countries and their immigrant groups of people or people who do not look like what they believe their country should look like. And I think that that's really upsetting, that there is still time for people to try to exert classism, racism, preference over who gets to flee a country that is being bombed and attacked when anybody with a heartbeat could die. And when we're dead, our bones all look the same, we all bleed the same. The goal should just be for everyone to leave. And I think it breaks my heart because I believe that in times of like fight, flight, or fawn, we go to a very primal place where you exude who you truly are as a person. And if that's your values and your morals, it's not get me out of there because I'm afraid. It's I'm so afraid that I'm going to try to use my whiteness to get a spot on this train out of this country before you, shows how racist those people clearly have always been somewhere in their brains and just maybe have not shown it out loud. Or maybe these people do. We do not know these people who are being racist, and maybe they are out loud racist around the Ukraine. I don't know how racist Ukraine is in times of non-conflict, but it's really sad. It's really upsetting. And it's, I think, one of the scarier things in my mind of like, okay, Canada goes to war. People start invading Canada. Are you telling me that I, born in this country, would get kicked off of a Via Rail train because I don't look like a Canadian? Because what does a Canadian look like? Like we're so proud of being this mosaic. And to flip the coin and try to put ourselves in those shoes, I cannot imagine getting kicked off of what could be the thing that saves my life because I don't look like a white person, even though like I am born, raised Canadian. I think it's insane.
Yeah, I first started seeing it all on social media. Students standing outside of trains with reports of them being pulled off trains, students pleading with military not to shoot them with hands up, screaming repeatedly, we are students, we want to leave. And I also heard reports of many Ukrainians spending up to a week in train stations, 140,000 people evacuating the country a day, women and children getting preference, and men having to stay behind. So I started to have some doubts. I started to wonder, like, are they really being refused entry onto these trains, or is this media hype? Is this just the media taking advantage of some social media videos going viral and exasperating the situation out of control and out of context, because it seems like a lot of people are not able to get on trains right now because of the massive exodus of, I think, 3 or 4 million people that have already fled Ukraine in the past weeks. But then I looked into it further and I learned a little bit more. And there's this one story I'm going to share of a woman who I believe was in Ukraine. And first of all, like we don't know, we are not educated enough to know the state of racism in the Ukraine. We know that in Canada, there are many racist police officers. There are many police officers who are involved in white supremacy organizations, white power organizations in the East Coast. I think there's, I don't know if it's 30 or 300 hate groups. We know that during the Freedom Convoy, the police were sort of enabling and embodying certain racist elements. And we know that there is just have been reports that within Canada and the States, even during the January 6th riots at the Capitol, when Trump lost, that, you know, having law authority racist is a pretty common thing. So it could be at the borders that it's really just the military or the police that are being racist, and we don't really know. But let me share quickly this clip of this one woman speaking about what she experienced herself at the border, and I want to get your thoughts on this. So this is our first time doing this on Zoom, but hopefully this all works.
Yeah.
Okay. If you looked on the other side, there was a fence.
So there, first of all, there was a car line to leave the country, and they had been waiting in the car for days to get out of the country, and then they were told that they were not in the right line. They had to get out of their cars and they had to get in this lineup instead to leave the country.
Of like physical people in line?
Yeah. And
like on foot. Okay.
Yeah. And she was just saying, like, how long would that take? Because we had already been sitting in our car for days. So she's being told that they have to get out and go to the line. And this is what she talks about, the queue that they wanted her to go to.
There was Ukrainian people who were just walking through. Yeah, we were told to queue. We had to queue. And there was not a single Ukrainian person in that queue. In the pedestrian queue, there was only people of color. There was Asians, Arab people, and Black people. There were no Ukrainian people in that queue. So as I'm filming it, he comes around and then he starts to lunge for me. There was clearly evident like it was a racial attack, because why were we being told to leave the car queue when nobody else was told to leave the car queue? So then they offered to assist, but I think their hands were tied as to so much as to what they do. As a Black woman, I was lunged at by one of the civilians. On our way to the border, a man held a gun up at me and told us that if we don't leave in 5 minutes, he'll shoot us. Other Black women have reported being shoved, being pushed, women with children. So it's been awful. It's been horrific.
So just go ahead.
No, I just want to know, like, so how did she get across? Like,
good question. Good question.
Okay.
I'm tempted to watch the rest of the video.
I know.
I'm sure she got it eventually. But
I mean, clearly she's actually safe just by having a gun pointed at, like, that's where I'm just like, you had a gun pointed at you, obviously because of racial discrimination. And then did you just try like another avenue, a different location? That's still absolutely insane.
Should we watch the rest of the video and find out?
We might as well. In worst case, we can just cut it if it's not useful.
Okay.
I've been in Romania since Monday night, and I have to say to you, the Romanian people, they've been so good to us. They've been so kind to us. There's been a massive effort of volunteers from people in Romania seeing where they can assist. And I'm particularly concerned for Africans, because we crossed over and we were met by a lot of Romanian people who were very kind to us, but it would have been nice to see some people who look like us. After what we've been through, like we're very like apprehensive right now. So it would be nice if other people are willing to go to Romania and Poland and Hungary and assist in the humanitarian effort. So what we need right now, I think, is support from the UN or people who have the powers to ensure the safety of those students. But I don't know if our community will be prioritized. So I just want to ensure that they're prioritized, because there's people as young as 16 there. There's children there, basically. and their parents are worried sick about them.
Wild, really sad. So I don't know how many Black people live in the Ukraine, but these were definitely students who were trying to get home. What I've heard is that a lot of Lebanese, Asian, Iraqi, African parents who can't afford to send their children for Western education in some of the richer countries had said we're sending their children to Ukraine to still get that European education, and then go home, I imagine. So that's a pretty graphic situation. Like, she got out somehow, but we're not sure how. And hearing these firsthand accounts kind of makes me believe that, yeah, even me being skeptical.
I've done some minimal research, and I
Yeah,
have unfortunate news. There's a whole article entitled "Racism in the Ukraine." I believe it is rampant, and so maybe this isn't
isolated.
that surprising. A 2010 poll conducted by the Kuras Institute of Political and Ethical Studies showed that 70% of Ukrainians estimate the nation's attitude towards other ethnic minorities as conflicted and tense. 70%.
That's insane.
Yikes.
Oh man, that sucks.
184 attacks and 12 racially motivated murders took place from 06 to 08.
Okay, so let's just be candid here. As
Let's
people of color,
back.
no, as people of color, like, this is what all of me and my friends, and maybe you may have been complaining about in your circles as well. It's been really, we started this episode talking about humans and humanitarians, and let's love each other and stuff like that. And our hearts go out to the people of Ukraine who are suffering. But as people of color, it's very difficult to have 100% sympathy for people in countries that the reporting is 70%. Can you say that again? Just that one sentence. 70%.
It was 70% of people that believe, like, that there was racial conflict and tension between ethnic groups and regular Ukrainians.
I'm all for Canada bringing people here to help them, but it just becomes hard to, completely open our hearts to.
Oh, I keep reading more. It's really not great. It's really not great. Human Rights Watch reported that racism and xenophobia remain entrenched in problems in the Ukraine. 2009, there were 40 racial incidents of violence reported. There's skinheads, there's neo-Nazis.
Oh man. Okay, well, here's where the episode gets really controversial.
Here's where we switch complete gears.
Because no, like, of course we're praying for Ukraine, but if Ukraine has a huge problem with exorbitant racism, like, where's the humanitarianism in that? Like, where are go ahead.
Remember when everyone was worried if we brought in the Syrians, we would bring in the terrorists, and now we're learning that Ukraine has a big skinhead problem, and we want to bring them to our fun little mosaic in the West.
It's a really hard, because I know Ukrainians, and they're wonderful, beautiful, completely not racist people. So we, especially here, try to always push the mantra that not all people are the same. We're not trying to push not all Ukrainians are racist, but that report is pretty scathing from our limited research. And yeah, it's hard to feel compassion for people who don't feel compassion for people of color. You may think Hillary's face is frozen there, but it's not.
During
what website are you reading this from? Where's this report
it's a
coming
huge
from?
Wikipedia article.
Okay, it's on Wikipedia.
It's on Wikipedia, and it literally is entitled "Racism in Ukraine." In 2009, the flu pandemic in Ukraine caused the police to ask people to report every time they communicated with a foreigner to the police in case they caught a flu.
Can you imagine this? Okay, we should have started the episode with this.
But that's like the same anti-Asian sentiment of COVID.
Yep, exactly.
That is exactly what that is, but like 10 years prior.
Yeah, there are Black people in every country in the world, and lo and behold, it's not just Canada and America. Like, even when I was living in Egypt, in Africa, I was in Africa for a month, and the dark-skinned Africans in Egypt, I hate to say it, they're not treated very well. They have the lowest level entry jobs. They're not educated properly. Every country in the world, there is racism against people with dark brown skin who are just humans. You have more? Let's keep going.
It keeps getting worse. Ukraine does not currently have well-established movements against illegal immigration or certain ethnic groups that are common in other former Soviet states. As a European country, Ukraine is prone to outside influence from the neo-Nazi and supremacist movements beyond its borders. For example, in areas of southern Ukraine that have closer cultural and linguistic ties with Russia, a number of neo-Nazi groups resemble those in Russia. So they're sharing Nazis with their enemies.
Wild. Well, there's lots of Russians in Ukraine, and
Of course.
yeah, there's wow, wild. Okay, so
Well, oh, and then I
not
had
good.
read something. Where was it? There was something. Oh, discrimination against the Polish is a whole separate thing. Oh my, wow. And the Tatars of Crimea. There's several groups apparently that they are not potentially fans of. I was trying to read. Bias-motivated violence has been largely committed against people of African and Asian origin, as well as people from the Middle East.
Wild. So yeah, war is bad.
Yeah.
But what you don't hear often is the perspective of from people of color on war. And while we do feel sympathetic to the people suffering anywhere, it's hard to feel the same kind of sympathy that you may get from other people with different cultural backgrounds when visible minorities are treated so bad in these countries that are begging for humanitarian support from the rest of the world right now.
And this is a great way to probably segue to our next bit, because it's funny. No, it's not really funny, but to hear that this country has a problem with racism, and like so does Canada, so does America, but to hear that they seem to have such rampant racism, but because of the portrayal of them as sort of this like white country, people keep talking about this war as if it's like the first problematic war to ever exist, when all these countries continue to commit wars against brown people all the time, and then or they don't talk about those wars, or they don't care about those wars. And I believe that you also have some clips and comments about that.
I do.
I do.
All right. So a couple of weeks ago, a CBS reporter was caught saying some pretty wild stuff. And where is it? I am not doing great with this Zoom tab. I can move it. All right. So this CBS reporter, where is it? That's Prince William. We're getting to you in 1 second there, buddy.
Yeah,
All
he's
right.
racist too.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So this
now with the Russians marching in, it's changed the calculus entirely. Tens of thousands of people have tried to flee the city. There will be many more. People are hiding out in bomb shelters. But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen. So it's partly human nature, but they are not in denial.
You want to yell first?
First of all, let me just give a statistic, because we talked about it twice, and this is unrelated to racism, but as of Friday, 2.5 million people had fled the Ukraine, which is the population of Vancouver. Just to put it in context, I had to do communications about it, so I have a direct correlation. What in the good fuck was that?
What are you talking about, bro? Europe? You don't expect to see conflict in Europe? Colonialism?
The colonizers?
Colonizers of lots of Africa, North America, slavery, UK, Spain, France, America. You don't expect to see conflict from the West? Like, y'all are the ones selling all the weapons to all these poorer countries so they can fight. yeah, you don't expect a war on European soil is what maybe he was trying to say, but F this guy for calling like Iraqis and Afghanistan like uncivilized. Why? Because they dress differently, because they don't wear suits and ties, or they don't like what? How are they uncivilized?
And again, decades of conflict. There's been potential conflict between Russia and Ukraine since like what, 2014? So that's almost actually a decade.
Literally.
The Cold War, the Soviet Union, all of these things are evidences that this has happened in the past with the literal countries it is happening with right now.
Yep.
Also, what did we talk about a few weeks ago that was like it was like the meeting, I had brought it up, but it was the Belgian meeting or something where they all decided how they were going to divvy up Africa. That meeting happened on European soil to divide up a whole continent for colonization and gain. And what people apparently live on that continent? Apparently the uncivilized. Like, what are you talking about?
So angering.
Just
I don't know.
Just say that you're upset that the white people are having a little fight, because the black people should be fighting and killing each other off because they're useless. Like, that's what you're really trying to say. And you like, what?
So angering. I do not know what happened to this news reporter.
Probably nothing.
I wish I had have looked into it before the airing of this
I can
episode.
look into it while you diss on Prince William next.
Well, yeah, let's I hope the viewers some people out there wouldn't have heard any of this yet. But yeah, so if you haven't heard the racisms going on regarding this conflict, it's pretty wild. Now, Prince William, and this just happened 2 days ago, Prince William's taken some fire because he actually said something a couple days that was not too dissimilar from what the CBS reporter said. I'll play the clip here. Hopefully it comes through nice and clear for everyone.
No, everyone's horrified by what they're saying. They are really horrified. And the news every day is it's almost infallible to actually witness it. So, from our generation, it's very alien to see this happen in Europe.
So if you couldn't hear that, basically Prince William was visiting the Ukrainian Cultural Center, and he said that everyone is horrified by what they are seeing, the news every day. It's almost unfathomable. For our generation, it's very alien to see this in Europe.
I'd like to add that a UK newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, wrote, "They seem so like us. That is what makes it so shocking. War is no longer something visited upon impoverished and remote populations. It can happen to anyone." A French news channel. We're not talking here about Syrians fleeing the bombing of the Syrian regime backed by Putin. We're talking about Europeans leaving in cars that look like ours to save their lives.
So people in the Middle East don't drive cars now?
What?
Wait.
What? Now, I know France is racist. Let's please. And we know that
Ukraine's pretty broke and
racist.
poor. And they're pretty broke and poor. Like, so what do they mean, like people that are like us? Sorry, you go ahead.
No, I don't even know what, my mouth is agape, but I don't know what to say, because it's both appalling and on brand. Like we were on a panel discussing the racism of the royals. Not that shocking. What's shocking is people that are supposed to be educated still saying the dumbest drivel. And again, this idea that the end of this article, hold on, it's on hollywoodreporter.com. But at the end of it, it does say that Al Jazeera, which is known for being quite good at all of this, went on to say that part of the responsibility of unbiased journalism is not to do comparisons like this, where you compare countries to another, because it causes these types of biases in reporting. And that's the big thing. Again, where we started and where we're ending with this is that war is always bad. Even if a country might be 70% racist, it's still very bad and very wrong, and none of these people deserve to be dying. Don't compare them to Syria, to all of these other places. It's bad everywhere. It doesn't matter how poor they are. It doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter what they drive or what you think they drive, or in your brain, it's huts and camels. And I don't know what garb you think they're wearing, but they don't deserve to die anymore. And it should just be just as shocking and devastating and disgusting and sad.
Yeah. I mean, doesn't look like us. Like, what do you, it's melanin. So, I mean, to anyone who's anti-science watching this or listening to this, I mean, science is the reason you're listening to this, but I mean, human beings are like genetically, I think like 99.97% identical. The genetics that account for a difference in melanin in our skin is so insignificant. Like looks the same, look like us, like opposable thumbs is like how are looks like what looks like humans. Like if it was like chimpanzees or cheetahs at war, that would be, I guess, less shocking than okay.
Is no one thinking about the fact that the crux of World War II was to push the Aryan dream, and now you're saying that you're sad that like white people are having conflict? Like, do people, not to generalize, but do white people think before they talk about what they're saying and about the history of the planet that they outright benefit from? The whole world, so many parts of it founded on the colonization, again, that is based on war from these European countries. You and I most likely would not be here right now if both England and France had not come and colonized Canada and enslaved Black people and Indigenous people. And y'all gonna turn around and say, oh, it's so, they look just like us, and it's so shocking to see them fight. What? You're starting half of the fights.
Yeah, it's just such a wild narrative, and it just reinforces the global media narrative that Black people are dangerous.
Yeah.
Black people are I mean,
yeah,
that we are the savage, barbaric
scum of the earth,
threats, criminals, and you and I, we are both half white and half Black. And let me say that no, our white heritage has a way more brutal history of absolute unhuman carnage, destruction, and abolition, like destruction of culture, world fighting, brutally savage. It is the savageness of half of our heritage, or some of our ancestors, that created these weapons. Like the need for stronger and more powerful and more damaging weapons, it is unfortunately something, part of the thing that pushed forward technology and science. The need to kill, the need to have power, the need to take over, the need for carnage. That's why the Europeans ended up with better weapons before African countries, because of this need for conflict. And to say that the visible minorities are the threat is absolutely shocking.
Again,
can I share this one more clip? Oh, go ahead.
Of course. No, I was just going to say that again, it boils down to this idea of like, because they look like the quote unquote us, we think we understand them, and as if there's still something ununderstandable about people of color, as if we have some kind of secret other interests, other world, that our cultures are not understandable, unfathomable. And again, we've now said it several times. We all bleed the same. We are all the same people with just goals and ambitions and dreams who want to wake up every day and know peace.
And if looking at adults doesn't tell you that clear as day, you got to look at the children. No matter what country you're in, war-torn, poor, rich, kids just want to grow and play and have fun. Yeah, like human kids are just human kids. And the idea that we're anything different or less is absolutely shocking. There's one more article I want to share. I think we're about to wrap this up. Even coming out of Al Jazeera, Al Jazeera, a global news organization, but based out of the Middle East, even they're being criticized for racist comments from some of their reporters. Now, I don't know who the reporter was that said this, what their cultural background was, and I believe down here is the quote that you just read.
Yeah, I read the two in an article of the UK newspaper.
Did you
below
read this
them.
one just now? Like, what's
No, I did not.
okay? So Al Jazeera English over the weekend, an anchor told viewers, "What's compelling is just looking at them, the way they are dressed. These are prosperous. I'm loath to use the expression middle-class people. These are not obviously refugees looking for to get away from areas in the Middle East that are still in a big state of war. These are not." People trying to get away from areas in North Africa. They look like any European family that you would live next door to. First off, that's not completely true. The Ukraine is the poorest of all the European countries. I wouldn't say they're Middle East. And second, I mean, the air of ignorance. Refugees, some people want to leave their country and go to the West, but most people who become refugees had no interest in leaving their homes, their families, their relatives, the places they've known. Humans are creatures of habit. That's why if you go to university or school, or even if you just go to somewhere once a week, you usually want to sit in the same place, sit in the same row, sit with the same people, eat the same food. People in the Middle East aren't just all like born there just, oh, I wish I could go to Europe, I wish I could go to Canada. There's lots of very wealthy people that were in Syria, much wealthier than in the Ukraine, that fled the country because America and Russia decided to have their little penis size competition in Syria and destroy the country there. So much offensive shit coming out of the media during this Russia-Ukraine war that I've been following very closely. And
again, the idea of like the way they are dressed, like if you put a brown person in jeans and Lululemon and Levi's, would that justify them fleeing their war-torn country? Like, you can't, just because something is what you know, like I have seen my dad wear in Senegal, it's called a pang, and it's basically like a skirt that men can wear, and it usually goes under a whole outfit situation. Finds it very comfortable.
It's very hot.
Because it's hot, and if my family's listening to this, because now some of them do, I'm sorry I outed you about this. But the point being that's their equivalent of jeans. That's what they're comfortable in. It's what, again, like you were saying about the different hat comparisons, what people wear on their head. Muslim people with headscarves that are told that it's because of their religion and not their choice. You can't look for what you know and then justify their actions because you think they are like you. There are people in this country who look just like us who are monsters, and there are people who look nothing like us who are the kindest people in the world. Like, if you put Ted Bundy in Levi's, that doesn't justify his like pillaging of people. Like, what is this comparison? What?
It's wild. And again, it's just media. They show us pictures over here of Middle Easterners in trucks wearing their galabeas, shooting off their AK-47s and saying they're animals. Well, you know what they're showing the people in the Middle East over there? They're showing them American hillbillies in pickup trucks with jeans and plaid shirts and cowboy hats,
and their Confederate flags,
and their Confederate flags shooting off machine guns as well. So we are the media, but also we have to acknowledge the media is going to show you the worst of the worst and show you the stereotypes that you want to see to reinforce your beliefs, so that you will continue to follow their news channels and support their narratives and make them ad dollars.
What country aired the most about Canada's convoy? Russia. So you want to know what they're ingesting? They're ingesting white supremacist Canada and being shown us as an example of who they should hate. And we are still trying to find ways to understand and justify the Freedom Convoy because it's just about our rights and we don't want to get jabbed. And I understand bodily autonomy. This is their evidence that we are the trash of the world. And then we've got news people being like, but they're not brown. And so they don't deserve war. This is so hard. This is so sad.
Wild. Well, I think this has been the Black Atlantic War Report. Episode 7.
Episode 7 in the bank.
Yeah, we got to wrap this up. So whatever your opinions on the war, there's racism taking place in the war. It's a conflict that, visible minorities have no choice but to see through a different lens. We hope there is peace in the future. do your own research, but we now know that Russia's not the only one to blame in conflicts like this. We have to look at ourselves in the mirror as North Americans and see where we're responsible for that. Yeah. Any final thoughts, Heather?
No, just that regardless of everything that we said, regardless of what's going on in all of these countries, I think, Black Atlantic, if I could speak for both of us, we just want peace. Whether that's the war on racism, whether it's the war in Russia, Ukraine, whether it's the way that Canadians treat Indigenous people, Black people, all the people. I think we just want peace. And it's still very sad what's going on there and in many other places in the world that don't get talked about either.
Yeah. Please follow us wherever you're listening to us right now. Join our email list on blackatlantic.ca. Definitely check us out on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter. I'm not sure if I'm forgetting anything. I'm Clinton Davis. This is Hillary LeBlanc, aka Cropberry, making moves, taking over the country. Any final thoughts?
We have a GoFundMe. We'd love to pay contributors and make cool content, so please donate to us there. Next week, I believe, I will verify, but I hope that our guest will be Winnie Churchill, who is a rapper out of Newfoundland, our first Newfoundland guest. Really excited about that. So keep listening and tuning in. And we have other really cool guests coming up that are not from New Brunswick, but are from the other places in the East Coast. And I think that that's really, really exciting. I mentioned the GoFundMe. And yeah, check out our really funny reels that we got to make while we were together. So one of them has like 1,000 likes, 1,000 views. And I'm just like, yeah, we get to film one video together. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I think we talked about that last week. We were together.
Well, last week we weren't
exactly
together yet. So because I was still hemming.
Yeah, but we got together, tried to have the photo shoot, had a good meeting. Hillary's coming back in a couple of weeks. It's going to be fun. But I'd love to say, if you're listening to the end, you're one of the real ones. Thank you so much for listening and supporting. If you are a listener who wants to get involved and contribute with us, there's the GoFundMe, but also if you're a writer into media, editing, video, any interesting ideas for the show or for the channel, or if you want to just try to bring your own thing, get in touch with us, send us a message, and we'd love to hear from you. And that's it from me.
Peace.
Peace.